Let me just fix this mic right here. Direct path. Hey guys, I want to talk to you today about 10 frugal tips that'll save you thousands. These are the tips that I've used in my daily life to help save me a ton of money. I've used these tips to help me go from working a minimum wage job in a city and to be basically barely able to pay rent to being able to get over a 50% savings rate. Financial independence is my big goal, and these tips are things that have supercharged my path to do that. A lot of these tips are things that can help save you a ton of money. These are not going to be things that save you $1 or $2. If you implement them, you can save hundreds or sometimes thousands of dollars. And a lot of these are either really simple mindset changes or really concrete tips. So let's jump right in. The first tip is pay yourself first. So what does that mean? Basically, it means that you decide before you spend any money at the very beginning of the month, how much am I going to save that month? It might be $50, it might be 10%, it might be as you get better and better, it might go up to 50% of your income. As you decide the amount that you want, you immediately deposit that money as soon as that check hits into your savings. That might be a high yield savings account, that might be a retirement portfolio, or that might be a stock account. Basically, instead of saving however much money you have at the end of the month, you pay yourself first. This tip is really good for anyone who struggles with that act of savings. Anyone who really wants to save money, but at the end of the month, they find that their checking account is always close to zero, no matter how hard they kind of try to be frugal. It makes saving a habit that you don't even have to think about. This might not work as well for people with varying amounts of income or people who are really scraping the bottom of the barrel to get by each month. But even if you can just set aside $10, $50 a month to savings, that can really grow over time, especially if you start young. This tip can literally pay dividends. The next tip is replace your phone battery. Don't replace your phone. This tip is something that can save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, because we know how much these expensive phones can get nowadays. So tell me if you've been here before. You've used your phone for a year or two, and after that, your phone's battery just starts to tank. I know I'm already feeling it with my phone. It's only like a year or two old, but already I can start to see the battery life start to decline. It's really tempting to just want to buy a new phone immediately, especially when those ads come out and there's some new features. But take a really hard look at yourself and think, do I really want those features? Or am I just fed up because my phone used to last me all day and now it can barely last me half the day? If really what you're annoyed about is the battery life, you can save a lot of money by simply replacing the problem. If you have an iPhone, you can go through the Apple Store or third-party repair shops. Sometimes third-party repair shops can do it for a little bit cheaper, and usually this will be a lot less to repair the battery than to repair the whole phone. Also, what might not be like the most obvious is when you repair a battery, you sometimes get a performance boost out of it. Number 3 is don't buy the name brand. So this is pretty simple to explain. It's don't buy the name brand. Okay, I'm kidding. I'm gonna go a little more in depth. I think a lot of us just default to those name brands, something like Oreos, Lay's, stuff like that, because either we grew up with them or that's just when we close our eyes and think, chips, it's Lay's. But I think sometimes it's good to just try out the generic brands and see if we like them as much as the name brand. It can be an assumption in our head that the generic brand will just automatically be worse than the name brand because it's cheaper, but a lot of the reason why the name brand is more expensive than the generic brand is because of how much they spend on marketing. It's not always the case that the name brand is going to be of higher quality or even use higher quality ingredients than the generic brand. A lot of times they actually use the exact same ingredients. And sometimes they're even made in the same factory, and at the end they just slap 2 different labels on them. It's in your best interest to just try out the generic brand once and see, hey, is this as good as the name brand? And sometimes it's actually even better than the name brand, and you'll be saving money and getting a better product for yourself. This can save hundreds in the long run because sometimes I've noticed that the name brand is like twice as expensive, and you can also shop different sales. So let's say that you like the name brand and the generic brand equally as well. Now you can choose which one is cheaper in the moment. If the name brand is on sale and actually cheaper than the generic brand, then this time you can keep buying the name brand, but next time if the generic brand is cheaper, buy whichever is cheaper. Next up, we have shop the cheap grocery store. I'm sure wherever you are, I'm not going to assume, actually. Usually there's multiple types of grocery stores in your area. There's going to be sometimes like a Whole Foods or more of like a bougie store. And then there's going to be more of a cheaper store. But if you shop around your area, you'll probably learn pretty quickly which one is the cheap store. These two stores will sell the exact same products, like literally same name brand, same size. The cheaper store will just sell it for less. And even if you have certain dietary restrictions or certain preferences that you can only find at the more expensive store, like let's say you really like to shop organic, you can still always choose to get certain items that are available at both stores at the cheaper store. Okay, editor me hopping in because it looks like I was about to jump off the rails maybe. Basically what I'm trying to say is that I'll shop at the cheap store for everything except for the items that I can't get at that store. So the items that are exclusive to a more expensive store, for instance a Trader Joe's item or an organic item, I'll shop at that store. But for everything else, I'm choosing the cheapest option. Take 2. Number 5 is think about the cheapest living situation that you're willing to live in and then try one step lower. So there was a study that said that 80% of living expenses comes down to 3 categories. It's food, it's cars, and it's rent/mortgage. I think for most people, rent is like the single biggest category. Anything we can do to lower that is going to be by far the biggest impact on our finances. And so while it can feel really, really, really uncomfortable to change how we are living, I think this is a tip that's really interesting to think about. Everyone has different standards of living. So for instance, some people might really be willing to live with roommates, whereas other people say, I could never live with a roommate. And I think sometimes we get in our heads and we just think like, if this is the way that I think it is, then this is always going to be the way it is. And we will never change. So I think sometimes it's good to just be like, I think that this is what I'm most happy with living, but I'm willing to experiment. So for instance, let's say you're like, I need 2 bedrooms for myself and I can never live with a roommate. Maybe next time you're browsing Zillow and you see a really attractively priced 1-bedroom apartment, you could always just look in the back of your mind and say, well, maybe, or maybe you have sworn off roommates, but then you really start to jive with someone and you think, okay, I swore off roommates, but if there's anyone I could live with, it would be this person. And remember, our lives can always change. If you try this and realize, no, actually, I was completely right, you can always be like, okay, after this lease is done, I am going to move back to where I was and I will never try this again. I think it's just about like trying something new and seeing if you're all right with it. Tip number 6 is used cars are your friend. This tip can save you honestly like tens of thousands of dollars, especially when you take into account how much interest you can pay on cars. Number 7 is the frozen pizza rule. So this rule is something that I made up to try to eliminate DoorDash from my life. And the frozen pizza rule is very simple. It states that in your freezer, there should be a frozen pizza at all times. So why does the frozen pizza rule exist? Well, I think that DoorDash usually is something that you turn to in like a time of crisis or like when you kind of just are over it or when you feel too lazy to cook. And the frozen pizza rule really helps guard against those times. So DoorDash usually is, I don't want to cook, I'm too lazy to cook, or I'm too lazy to go to the grocery store. And you do it and you go, oh, that was terrible. It took like an hour for the food to get there. It was lukewarm. It was expensive. That was a horrible experience. And you vow to be like, okay, next time I'm not going to be lazy. But it's okay to be lazy. And you know what? We're all lazy sometimes, so we can't really stop ourselves from being lazy. So the frozen pizza rule is just a way to be lazy without as big of consequences as spending like $100 on 2 burgers from McDonald's delivered to you. So by having frozen pizza in your freezer, next time you really want DoorDash, you go, wait, I can just get a frozen pizza, which is the same amount of effort as getting DoorDash. Honestly, it's less. You just put a frozen pizza in your oven. It's the same amount of time as DoorDash, or honestly, it's faster because DoorDash sometimes takes like an hour and a frozen pizza takes about 20 minutes. And honestly, it tastes about the same as DoorDash or even better because the food's not going to be lukewarm. It's going to be piping hot. and it's way, 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 way cheaper than DoorDash. The frozen pizza is sort of a stand-in. If you don't like frozen pizza, you can always just get something else. Basically the concept is something that's really easy to make and something that can stay shelf stable. So it can be like a frozen lasagna or a TV dinner or something like that. Number 8 is think reusables. So reusables can sometimes be slightly more of a cost upfront, but in the long run, they are so much more worth it. So for instance, instead of buying bottled water, you can buy a water filter. Instead of getting coffee every day, you make coffee at home. It can be slightly more expensive to buy that $20 water filter, but instead of spending hundreds of dollars on water bottles a month, very, very quickly it pays for itself. It's better for the planet if you use reusables. It's a lot less effort, I find, to just buy like one little water filter than buying like these super heavy water bottles, then fill up your recycling bin. And to me, it just feels better to be using reusables. Like, I feel happier. Number 9 is keep a budget. This is one of the simplest tips you can give to someone, but it's also one of the hardest to keep up with over time. There are some great apps that can help you, like You Need a Budget. You can also go old school and just keep it on your own Excel sheet, or you can go really old school and keep it on a pen and paper. That to me is too old school, but like whatever you want to do. The reason why you want to keep a budget is because if you don't know how you're spending your money, you don't know what steps to take to limit spending your money in the future. Number 10 is keep it on the wish list. So this is what I've started to do when I see something I really want on Amazon, and it's really tempting to click the buy it now button, but instead I just add it to my wish list and you just keep it there for a certain amount of time. So let's say 24 hours, it can even be as much as a week. Making yourself just take that little pause is really helpful with stopping impulse purchases in their tracks. And then if you go back to it, you know that there's a reason you're going back to it. Another really great bonus for this is that at the end of the year, you have a really great Christmas list to give to people. This is like not the main benefit, but it is a really good one. Okay, so that was 10 frugal tips that can save you thousands. What was your favorite tip on this list? And are there any others that you use that have saved you thousands? I really want to know. If this doesn't work, if this didn't record, I'm gonna